I'm Lisa Crispin.
And I'm Janet Gregory. Welcome to another episode of Donkeys and Dragons video chat, where we chat about testing related topics for about 15 minutes. Today, we are pleased to welcome Lewis Prescott as our guest. Lewis is a QA lead and a leading practitioner of contract testing for microservices. Always sounds kind of scary when I hear things like that. Based in England, he has his own podcast, so we're doubly happy to have him on this one. And he has a blog on Pactman Consulting website. Did I say that right, Lewis?
Pactman? Yeah, I love that name, right. Pactman.
He's also developed a course for Testing Automation University. Active as a speaker, including a 99-minute workshop for and a masterclass for Ministry of Testing. So that's quite impressive. Today, Lewis joins us to talk about how to use holistic testing with microservices and contract testing, something that we haven't talked about before on this video. But first, a quick reminder about what we mean by holistic testing. So it's the infinite loop, kind of, but with different, a little bit different stages, I guess, starting with discovery, ending with learning and different testing activities. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing slides so we can get into our chat. All right. Let's go.
So, Lewis, it's just great to have you join us, and thank you for even offering to do it. Is awesome. And we just want to start by making sure that all our viewers know what is contract testing and get a high-level view of how it's used for testing microservices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think usually people have heard about contract testing, but don't usually have an idea of how they would use it or where it fits into that kind of microservices, especially. So usually I kind of describe it as when you've got integration testing, because that's what people usually background they've come from, then you're flipping that kind of upside down or in reverse. So the person who's using the API or using the service is then the one writing the tests. So the way that contract testing works is the contract is defined by the user or the service, and then the API then just replays those requests. So it's it's kind of like integration testing, but you're handing over ownership.
That's the best explanation of it I've heard, to be honest.
Okay.
I have a lot of experience testing APIs if you're the API provider, but I haven't gone the other way so much. And I don't have any hands-on experience testing applications that use a microservices architecture. But from what I've read, there are a lot of big challenges compared with monoliths, testing monoliths. So I'm curious how this holistic testing model could be applied for testing microservices. So when we're looking at the left-hand side of that model, the testing activities around discovery, planning, shared understanding, and building, what's important there for microservices?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the holistic approach really comes in handy, and I've used it a lot in kind of the strategies that we've created in my teams, because it really comes down to that planning phase. And as you said, like there's lots of challenges, and if you don't think about them at the planning phase, then things get out of hand very quickly, and then you realize you're in production and you don't know how to find any issues. So yeah, it's things like putting in test stubs or doubles so that you can test all of these services and all of these dependent systems without actually relying on them. So often the services are built by separate teams when you've got microservices, because that's generally how companies are split up. We provide a domain, and then someone gets a domain, and within that they inherit services or they build services within those domains, and actually they might be tightly linked to another domain. So that's where kind of the intertangled nature of microservices and contract testing especially really comes in, because you can define these things, you can create a communication between them, and then that's where these tools really help you out, because we're all human, we all make mistakes, we all forget to communicate something, and that's when changes break. So that's where kind of, yeah, contract testing comes in, allows you to check for things like backwards compatibility. That comes all in the kind of planning building phase, right? So when we're planning our changes, we can use we want to communicate these changes within the APIs, we create mocks, create stubs, all that good stuff. And then when we are, as I mentioned, when we are running our pipelines, we want to run them on what we control. When you've got integration environments which have lots of dependencies, lots of intertwined systems, they can become very difficult to maintain. So we want to test them independently. And that's, again, where the kind of holistic approach comes in, because once we've done that planning, we can then build better, and then we can move on to the next stages, if you like.
Right. So that's the next stages that you're talking about, which you started talking, was deploying, right? Being able to deploy and do that. So if we move to the right side of the model, which is, deploying, releasing, observing, and learning, especially from production use, what activities do you see are especially useful for microservices?
Yeah, so building on that building phase and planning phase. So once we understand who our dependencies are and who is consuming those services, we've hopefully communicated with them that these changes are happening, but all of these things can be deployed out of sync, right? So you have to make sure that they're backwards compatible and everything like that. So that's where in the deployment phase, you want to check, okay, can I deploy these changes? And you can then version them, tag them, all that stuff, and make sure that you are deploying to the right version of the microservices, because everything might be out of sync, and you want to make sure that each team has everything in the right place at the right time.
Sounds very complicated.
It does. I mean, because it is, my understanding of microservices, you might be deploying one microservice here, and other people are making other changes to other microservices and then deploying. Like, it's all going, to me, I see this fire hose of things going out to production.
Yeah, not everyone's deploying all the time, right? So that's the kind of dream goal, is that everyone deploys multiple times a day and they can deploy whenever they want. But in reality, that's not the case, right? Like in larger organizations where I've worked, you have a release management team, right? So they're making sure that no one's really releasing critical stuff all at the same time across multiple teams. Whereas, in reality, people are releasing either at the end of a 2-week sprint, or they have a release cadence of like a week. So usually that's the case in my experience anyway. And so, yes, it is complicated in terms of you may have many dependencies that could potentially break on your change. And that's where the kind of observability stuff comes in. And that's where you want to be deploying to these environments as early as possible, so that you can check that everything that you've mocked out, everything you've stubbed out, actually integrates correctly.
Right.
So you've got a safety net of the automated contract tests, and you've got a safety net of really good monitoring and observability to see if anything unexpected happens in production, so you can react to that.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of approach that I've seen work well, is because traditionally we've used end-to-end tests, which test the whole system. No matter whether you're using a monolith or a microservice, it's all the same at the end of the day to the application. But if you want to move quickly and you want to get that feedback quickly, and you don't want to have end-to-end tests that break all the time, then having that monitoring is key. And if you can get that into a test environment, then that's great. Or if you're a fast moving organization, you can test in production with feature flags. It's up to you. But yeah, the observability really adds that kind of real use case.
Right. Do you do any exploratory testing as well on the microservices?
Yeah, usually, well, it depends on how you've set up your pipeline, but ideally you would be able to either pull down a feature branch locally, so you could do that as part of the kind of build phase or part of the deploy phase, but in a like dev environment that's not kind of fully integrated. So yeah, usually we do the exploratory stuff on the build or the feature itself, and then yeah, as we go into the integration environments, we do like mob testing and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Which is working really well with a big feature.
Do you get a cross-section of the team involved in your mob or ensemble working together?
Yeah, absolutely. Like product are in there, developers are in there, the QAs from other teams. So yeah, that's been working really well. We've been finding lots of issues that come out of that that people hadn't thought of.
Lots of different ways to mitigate risk. Okay,
yeah.
So I think, Lisa, we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I just am curious. I mean, you shared some of your stories already, and it's really nice to see that the holistic testing model can be applied for the testing strategy for microservices apps as well. But I imagine you've run into some other interesting challenges in your own work. I'm just wondering, can you tell us about one of those?
Sure, yeah. I think relating back to like what we've been talking about, often when you build microservices, you still have a monolith, and that usually is the database. Because everything's talking to the same database, or everything relies on an entry in a database. And so that's kind of where we found challenges. And also we've got that on the front end as well. The front end communicates with all of the services, and then if one of them breaks, then the front end breaks. So yeah, that tightly coupled nature is still difficult, even when you've got microservices going on in the background. But yeah, to move to our future, kind of how we're resolving that. We're duplicating data across databases now via sync. So we have multiple sources of the data, which is working well. And then moving to asynchronous, so via events. So we're not a lot of the data doesn't need to be real time. Right, so moving those to events so that we can just update the data in the background, so it doesn't block anyone on the front end. But yeah, these solutions have been around forever, but every startup, every team goes through them.
Has to learn new things and figure out what their problem is and how to solve it.
Exactly.
So thanks. We learned so much from people like you and your stories, but that's all the time we have today. One last thing. What is the best place for people to follow your work and find your courses, like on Test Automation University or Ministry of Testing?
Yeah, so I've just released a new course on Test Automation University, Acceptance Test Driven Development. So go find that on the TAU website. And I've got a masterclass coming up with Ministry of Testing on how to be a manager without the title. So check that out if you go pro on their platform. And then, yeah, as you mentioned earlier, I'm Pactman. So you can find me at pactman.co.uk or follow me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. All right.
Awesome. So, yeah, that's good to know about your X7 tester and development course, because I love having resources to recommend to people to learn about that. So very cool.
So this is, I'm just going to share the screen. So contact us, Lisa and I. You can subscribe to our newsletter. We have new content every month. The new one will be coming out at the beginning of April. Don't forget to check out our blog posts on agiletestingfellowship.com. And as a surprise, I guess. Lisa and I have been working on a new mini book, which we intend to make available for free. It'll be about holistic testing and how to kind of create a quality strategy, something along that line. So watch for the next week or two for notifications, and hope you are able to download it. And
yeah, it'll be downloaded from agiletestingfellow.com. So
yeah,
keep an eye out.
please do. All right. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Thank you,
Yeah,
Lewis.
Thanks again, Lewis. It's really, I learned a lot. So this is great in such a short time.
It is
really awesome.
It happens very quickly. So talk to you later. See you all next month.
Bye. Thanks.